this was
Also a 0.
okay, that's my mistake, all right. Thank you.
Tax rate yet?
No, yes and no.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
I know the feeling.
It's gonna be less, I know that.
She'll let us know.
She said just give her a few, and she'll be good.
Give 1 more minute, you're good.
Okay.
She's gonna run down and get a quick coffee.
Sometimes that's the best way to go.
Drink my ginger ale?
I got mine.
Jamie, you good? No Wi-Fi?
No.
Yeah, mine won't go either, but I'm good. Can't read anyways.
Did you get the star in the beginning?
That's
Yep.
why I brought my cord too. I figured, well, maybe I'll have better luck.
I don't think the cord will help the Wi-Fi.
Oh,
Can we get a booster?
The town Wi-Fi, the Slate Networks, the town Wi-Fi is, we have a work order in, just waiting for them to repair it. It goes in and out.
That's probably my issue. That's alright. I like to look up there anyways.
I don't think it goes in and out if I've got it and two people sitting right aside of me don't have it.
Maybe you're booting them out.
Yeah.
Maybe
I
it
never
just
had any
knows.
trouble before.
It's called bullying.
Sorry, guys.
I've got the agenda.
You're in.
Should be good.
Okay, call the meeting to order at 6:38. A reminder to everybody, this meeting is being digitally recorded live, so when you make your comments, keep that in mind. We'll begin with open session. Is anyone here for open session? Okay. Ryan, announcements?
Just one from this weekend's event, so the town common is lit, the town tree. It was a very, very nice ceremony on Saturday. The weather broke, which was excellent. We were expecting some rain. Dozens of people for sure attended. There was a brass concert at the church up on the common, and then sing-along. And I did sing on behalf of the board and everybody, so that was good. Brought my family to the event. It was great. The tree up and the menorah, so very successful. So it is now Christmas for sure, and the holiday season. Light fight is done tonight. It'll be the final voting, so there should be a winner announced tomorrow, which is very good. It's a very successful campaign, hundreds of votes, lots of interest in the town. I was able to make several of the houses. Jamie, I didn't get to yours. We were in full 3-year-old meltdown at that point, but I was intending to get there. So you should be able to see that on social media and our other events. It was successful by every measure, to include hundreds of shares in areas around ours, bringing people to the town. And I know that Katie was collecting data on how many people visited businesses while they came into town, so hopefully we'll have those statistics for you in the Economic Development Committee as well. And then it wouldn't be Katie if we weren't automatically promoting the next event, which is Frozen Assets. So this is an outhouse on the ice, and people vote on or guess when that's gonna fall through the ice. So it's a competition we hold throughout the winter. It's a $20 donation if you wanna make a donation to the Special Events Fund. If you don't, you can still participate for sure. The forms are available at the Country Trail, Pizza Palace, Hubtown Diner, Giacomo's Gourmet, Broberg Insurance, Prue Family Financial, and here at the town offices. So those looking to sponsor or take a part in Frozen Assets, we are ready to start the next event. And people are gonna keep their lights up obviously through the holidays, so if you didn't get a chance to go and vote, you know, a lot of people put in a lot of work on the light fight, so. continue
Where is
to
that
do.
going on, Ryan? Where's the Frozen Assets?
This
Hen
is
Pond.
it's located on Williamsville Road at the Country Hen Pond, starting in
Country Hen.
February.
Okay.
Right now, we're taking sponsorships and guesses, and then the actual outhouse will go up, and there'll be a picture of it daily on social media for people to follow.
It used to be at Bent's Pond. Better, the business,
Years ago,
Better Business
yeah.
Bureau, they ran it, but I can remember always seeing it in at Bent's Pond, but, okay.
Are we gonna put a live cam on it 24/7 so we can?
I know
See
that's
when
the
it
idea, but
Nice.
you know, logistically, we're trying to get to that point.
All right.
And then the last quick announcement, because people will see it, I'll throw it up on the screen for 1 second. This
Saw
is
those today.
brand new sign on Route 68 coming from Gardner southbound. So this is on the right, in front of the Demelia property for those in town, of the old carpet place. It's just after that on the crest of the hill coming in. There's also one on the intersection of 62 and 68, so these are the first two signs. Their EDC is currently talking about sign sponsorship and where to add new ones, but that's gonna be decided into the spring, as we're not gonna be breaking ground on any more signs. So it's a little welcome to the town, good work by the Economic Development Committee getting this going, and hopefully it'll continue to draw attention to what they're trying to do, which is promote the current good aspects of the town.
Oh, they look good. After I picked up my son from Quad when we were coming home, and he saw it right away at 62 and 68. He said, "Look at that, Dad." I said, "Oh, I did get it up." So, looks great. Any others?
That's it.
Okay. Under new business, the public road damage fine discussion for 21 Hale Road. Would you mind kicking it off, and then we?
So the board asked that, based on public participation last week, that this be an agenda item. Did make the phone calls I was supposed to. I spoke with Travis about this, so the intention here was, there was, and it's debatable the level, but there was damage to the road. So the stance of the town, the way the bylaw is written, and I gave you a copy of it, is we do not define damage, we just follow the bylaws. It's written, which, you know, it could be up for discussion that it's not written correctly, or needs to be changed in the future if the board or the residents want to look at it differently. But as it's interpreted here, if damage is done to the public way, then we issue a fine. The actual language on the fine is, it's a $300 fine per day until the party that damaged the road fixes it. We don't apply that level of per day. That's the way it was written.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's not
Can
a
I just-
$300 fine, it's a $300 fine per day till damage is fixed.
Correct.
Right, so if I could,
We did not assess, I'm sorry, we
That's
did not
okay.
assess $300 per day. I'll
Can
just-
you put those pictures up?
I actually have pictures from today as well,
'Cause
that I can provide you with.
Excuse me.
Yep.
I'll recognize you in a minute. Okay, but you want to get the pictures up there?
Yeah.
That-
I also have handouts.
Okay, would you identify yourself?
Yeah,
please?
I'm Faye Zukowski, co-owner of Bay State Concrete.
Okay, want to bring those up?
Sure.
Sure.
I have some for
Thank you.
each of you.
Thank you so much. Did you get to see these, huh? Oh, I got extras.
I know there's 3 pictures each.
Oh, there's 3. Oh,
Yep.
okay.
So I think the picture on the screen is from the ones that we received with the fine?
Yeah.
Okay.
So have you finished? I didn't know.
No, so, yeah, the information is requested from the board, and obviously answer any more questions. The staff takes the general stance to make sure that we're protecting the road. And in all permitting and other applications, we take the same stance, whether it be public health or, planning or police work. It's not our job to interpret the bylaw, it's to apply it.
Okay.
I just wanna say, when I saw these pictures, I was kinda shocked, because went up there in person and looked at them, and they weren't as noticeable as they are on that because of the salt sitting in them, so I actually went up there again to look at them, cause I thought maybe I missed something, but they're still not, in my opinion, they're superficial scratches, there's a couple indentations, but structurally, there was no damage to the road, that I could see, you know. According to Ed, he used the planks the best he could.
They're still sitting there.
You know, obviously it's a tough spot, cause it is narrow there, trying to get in there. You know, maybe one board slipped out or whatever, obviously something rubbed, but I mean, I don't know, I don't really see anything structural there, in my opinion.
The pictures that I provided show the cracks that are in the road. I didn't crack the road.
No.
I didn't crack the road. I made a couple of white little scuff marks. That's it. There's nothing to be fixed there. There's no damage, there's no way
So those tracks aren't yours?
that.
Those aren't yours, is that what you're saying? Those tracks?
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying there's no damage done by it. You follow me? They're not that structural to the road or anything. It's a visual mark. It was like a scratch. The excavator has flat pads, right? It's not like a bulldozer where it has tall grousers. They're very, very flat pads, okay? And what they'll do is they will scuff, okay, or scratch. One of my tracks slipped on my boards that are there, okay, and made a little scratch. That's it. Not the cracks that you show, all that. That's all prior damage.
You see what he means, Jeff? These cracks here are just from settling of the road, but just these scratches.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, I went up there and I actually came from the other direction where your truck is, and I walked and I'm like, where the hell is it? And I turned and I didn't see it, and I turned around and then I could barely see it from the other direction, but when I walked over, you couldn't even see it.
Mr. Chair, so my question, I guess, to
I'm
the
sorry.
board would be, in this bylaw, it states that damages need to be repaired, and that's what the fine is for. So I guess my question to Travis would be, what repairs can be made to this? Because that's what the bylaw is really for, is so that it can fix damages, or you have the right to, pay the fine, or you have the right to fix them. In order to fix this, we would have to cut 10 feet of asphalt up and repave it. In essence, if
Cutting
it's
the road is
considered
not- is-
damage, that would be the repair. You can't bondo it, or, you know. So I think in that manner, fining somebody for damage, what's the ultimatum for repair?
So to speak for the staff, because
Mhm.
Travis is in here, so it's not, the bylaw is written to protect the road from the public road from damage.
Correct.
I understand.
So the way it's written, we don't have a lot of leeway as staff. So it just says damage to the road will be fined until it's repaired by the person who damaged it. In this sense, we're not asking you to fix it.
So, but you're asking me to pay a fine.
Well, it says it
Well, the
shall
bylaw
be,
is
but the bylaw
leeway.
says shall be responsible for the repair of said damage. The said damage is what Travis is claiming this to be damage.
Yes.
So
He listed
we-
it to me as not, he never listed it to me as damages. He listed it to me as imperfections.
Right.
Imperfections is how it was
So I guess
brought,
I'll ask
brought up
again.
to. My picture is showing more greater imperfections on that road created by Mother Nature settling, whatever it may be, than the imperfections that my machine did.
So again, it says to the satisfaction of the Department of Public Works Director, which first of all, we don't have, just so you know. The bylaw says Public Works Director. We have a DPW Superintendent, correct? Okay.
I didn't write the bylaws.
I understand that. That's who it says would do that. So,
Well, I think this
again,
is, but it's also highlighting a point that is facing us at the moment. This is our bylaw as it stands right now. Granted, there are some areas that could deal with rewriting,
mhm,
because it doesn't specify what damage means.
correct, I agree.
What is enough damage for the fine as opposed to,
Enough damage for the fine would be something that's repairable, I would think so.
Because that's what this that's what this part of this is you could repair it. We are in the business to do that type of stuff.
Mhm.
So for us to say, we're fining you, or you can fix it, because that's how this reads, there's not a repair for this unless you want us to cut up the road, cut it up, dig it out, and put it back in.
well,
Which will then have a major imperfection when you drive down the road.
before we go further though, our position, or Travis's position right now is, correct me if I'm wrong, the fine, that the town will fix it.
How is he gonna fix that though? I think you're gonna compromise the road more by
Mhm.
trying to fix that
Mhm.
than by leaving it.
Definitely,
My-
there's nothing to fix.
When I
Exactly,
read this
it's not-
bylaw, I don't wanna take sides here, but if I.
Neither do we, which is applying.
Exactly,
It's the
but-
same thing with speeding. You can say, you go 5 miles over, 10 miles over, the speed limit is the speed limit, we have to apply it. Otherwise, we can be accused of bias, or we're trying not to make it personal, it's just the
Well,
way the bylaw is.
to me, damage would be structural damage, that's just cosmetic damage there. Obviously, he did use boards because you only see one track mark there. If he didn't use any boards, there'd be two
Yeah,
sets of
the outside
tracks
track
going
would be
in.
on the right-hand side of the imperfections.
Cause I did look for that, and I
Mhm.
didn't see it. But I mean, in my opinion, something like this I don't wanna put myself in Travis's shoes, but I would say, hey, listen, you know, you didn't do anything structural to the road, I'm gonna give you a warning this time. If you cause damage again like this, then you're gonna get a fine. There's nothing structural here, if it was something structural, I'd say, fine, give him the fine, but.
Mhm.
I wouldn't be here right now,
I'm
wasting 2 weeks of my time.
Yeah, in all honesty, a homeowner with a plow on their truck that came out of their driveway could potentially cause similar damage. It won't look the same because it's not tracked, but the plow could cause that
They're
same
not
damage.
deep and it's not gonna last.
Right. By springtime, you won't see those because the plow's gonna go over it so many times that it'll just be gone. So I guess the other question is, in this bylaw with fines, there's no appeal process.
Well, this we're aware of, and that's another
Yep.
point to this particular bylaw that it needs some looking into, and one of the things gonna bounce off the board is if the feeling is that we need an appeal process for this.
I think it would be a good idea to have I mean, if I get a fine for something that I didn't think I was liable for it, I'd want to voice my opinion somewhere.
I mean, I would think in the letter from the town, it should say, if you have any objections to this, please contact the town administrator, or DPW superintendent, or whoever, for that. But that's
And
my,
we would
that's my
never-
opinion.
We would never expect a staff member to add that to, they take responsibility for applying their bylaws. There just is no provision in the bylaw for it. If the board does wanna make an appeal process, you certainly have that right. We've had 35 permits in the last 3 years, and there's been three fines issued out of the 35. And Siri's weighing in though.
To your point, Pat, if we were to have an appeals process as to who would they be appealing to, if it's the board, then we are opening ourselves up to whatever happens. We could have all
Yeah,
these
but
people coming
think
into us.
any type of bylaw like that, you should have someone to voice your opinion
I'm not
to.
arguing that, I'm just simply
Yeah.
saying, the logic right now is it would probably come to us, and I'm just simply saying it's something we should consider as a board. Do we wanna open that particular can of
Well,
The
beans?
appeal couldn't go to the ticket writer,
No, I think
So,
everything
it would
comes
have to
to
go
us
to-
anyways.
Mhm.
somebody else.
know.
A neutral party.
Right.
Any other board members have any other feeling on this, one way or the other?
No, just as, I don't think there's there's nothing really to repair, you know, like they said,
So you're favoring what, Jamie? Just for discussion purposes?
I mean, maybe we could, have an appeal process, you know, the bylaw's written and Travis did what he felt at the time was right, even though it's just kinda scratch.
Well, how about in this particular case, do you have any feeling one way or the other on this?
I would say change it to a warning.
Yeah, do we have the ability to do that?
That I don't
No.
know.
But, I mean, the bylaw can be reviewed as part of the regular bylaw review process. But the staff does need instruction on how we are to apply this bylaw.
That's-
And in most cases, it's not a local resident who does business in town that we're looking to protect the roads from contractors who sign contracts and could potentially provide some serious damage to the public roads. You know, it doesn't sound like that's what's going on here, but we want to make sure the bylaw also protected the town from that.
Absolutely.
But I mean, I would think it's like a ticket thing again. If you got a ticket for doing 35 and a 30, you're gonna say, well, he was basically, given the ticket because he was speeding, but you have no way to appeal it,
No, I wouldn't have had a
you know?
process that didn't include an appeal. Because I'd want to protect the staff from that too, so the staff can be non-discriminatory in application of the bylaws. Same thing with tax collection, same thing with all permitting, building inspector. All of them have appeal processes. I think you have some of your issues with the Department of Public Works claims because it always stops with the superintendent and there is no further direction or appeal process. So they end up dealing with the public and the contractors rather than second and third layers.
So Jamie, when you're saying you don't see that much damage either, would you be agreeing with Pat in terms of a warning?
Yes, I would, yeah.
But the only thing is, we don't know if we can do that as the bylaw is written, so my point is, it appears, how do you feel on that, Chris?
How do I feel? Well,
Jamie and Pat are recommending a warning.
here's how I feel. I don't think the damage raises to the level of a $300 fine. Unfortunately, from what I'm hearing is there's no way to reverse a $300 fine that was already levied against the party sitting here, correct?
So if the board wants to vote to have this appeal process, have it applied, then the staff will execute the will of the board. We just don't want to do it unilaterally without we
Right.
don't want to be in the habit of going against the town's bylaws
Understood.
without understanding how we're supposed to interpret them.
But today, we don't have a mechanism to review this and reverse the fines. What you're saying is we need to come up with an appeal process
Right.
to create that mechanism.
Because essentially, he's appealing right now,
Right,
but we don't have an appeal process
right,
in place.
The
right.
fine has not been paid.
Nothing against you on that, it's just, as is written.
It's a stepping stone.
yeah.
The fine has not been paid. There's no penalties right now as this is being discussed.
Well, it doesn't look like there can be any penalties, cause those aren't spelled out either.
All we have right now is a letter. Well, we're
Correct.
trying to take care of this
But it
letter
doesn't say if-
instead of making it go into something else.
Right.
That's,
It doesn't say there's any penalties. So even if we so chose not to pay it, there's no penalties, according to the
I'm-
bylaw.
Correct. I wouldn't want a precedent where if someone damaged the road, there wasn't a mechanism to enforce it.
I agree, yep.
I
I
know that-
understand.
I know you're
As a
here for your
resident of the
issue.
town, I appreciate and understand the protection of the roads,
Right.
you know?
We've waited a long time to have good roads.
25 years I've been driving down these roads. 25 years. I understand 100% what's there, but I also know the difference between an imperfection and damage. You know what I mean?
Well, if I might make a suggestion, since we need some kind of a process, I would recommend then that we consider just tabling everything. It's not gonna cost you anything in that sense, while we find out, number one, if we can in fact waive it, as they're leaning towards, and also to look into getting an appeal process written out somehow that we can then include into our bylaws. So my recommendation would be, leave it, he doesn't have to worry about it at this particular point in time, let's table it and
No,
until we
I
can
would
get further
recommend that,
information.
if you haven't seen it in person, to drive up there and see it too.
No,
you
I'm
know.
I'm not arguing for the fine,
Oh, no,
I'm
I know
arguing, I
that,
don't
I
know
know
that
that,
we can
but
waive it.
just for your own
yeah, mhm.
satisfaction, go up there and take a look at it.
What is the process to get an appeal process?
To change a bylaw,
Yeah,
Town meeting?
Town
it
meeting.
has to go to town meeting.
till next summer.
Do you have to change the bylaw
Yeah.
or add to it?
No, you'd have to amend it.
This would have to be.
Either way, it's in, yeah, you
It's
open
an
it up.
amendment to the bylaw.
Has to be done at town meeting.
Mhm.
And then that bylaw would be changed so that folks who do have a situation like this can come in and appeal it. We'd amend the bylaw to have an appeal process.
Correct.
Mhm.
If you wanted to formally have me ask town council whether or not you have that ability, I certainly can. I do think it is within your rights to interpret the bylaw for the town. So if you wanted to
Well, maybe we should,
institute a temporary process until such a bylaw can be changed, then I can vet it with council. If I'm wrong, we can bring it back.
Well,
But I
maybe
do
we-
think you have that power.
maybe we should go that way, inquire it rather than have someone have to sit until summertime, it's technically in a sense, to find out what's gonna happen, but, from our point of view, because in the same sense, from our point of view, as I see it, perception also is if right now we were to just forgive it, and then somebody else has something, the perception could be, not too,
If the other person has an imperfection and a damage, you might have the same situation as you have here.
Yeah.
The other guy rolls the bulldozer off and breaks the road, there's nothing
well, point taken, or
to argue.
someone who
you
actually
know?
causes damage can come and say, well, someone else was here and you said it was okay for him, you didn't claim.
Could be
So-
multiple things. I mean, coming in and off of there, I put the driveway in. There's multiple other contractors that go in and out of there by the time I go back. Well truck, everything,
But
you
we
know?
have to also consider the people who work for us to enforce this, or
Correct.
to know that, okay, there's one thing for everybody,
Mhm.
as opposed to, well, why should I even go out there, because you let this one off, you let that. So this is what we're also facing.
But that's why you have an appeals, because
Well, that's what we're talking about, to
Mhm.
try to
every
get that.
circumstance is different.
Mhm. I mean, I think we would have no issue waiting until
Mhm.
you guys figure this out. I mean, $300 is a nominal fee to us. It's not about that. I guess it's the principle of the fact that this letter comes across that as if the road was truly damaged. And,
Well, then, should we?
It's so small.
right,
Should we table the issue for the time
Right
being
here.
while Ryan
Yeah,
looks
let
at,
Ryan
checks
look
with
into
council
it and get back to us.
Yeah.
to get
And
back
then-
to us as to what we can or cannot do?
sure.
And then Ryan can notify me of what to do if I need to come in again, or whatever, we can get this resolved.
I think that would be the best way. Do we need a motion for that, just to table it, or?
So, to be clear, the $300 fine is just gonna
Be pending?
Sit.
be pending, sit.
Yeah.
It's not gonna increase, it's not
Limbo.
gonna decrease, it's not gonna accrue interest or anything
Until we
like
can
that.
find out what council says we can do
That's
or can't
also
do.
Right, and you're gonna find out what council says we have the authority to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that all right with everybody on the board?
Yep.
We,
Thanks for your patience.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
okay with you folks?
Yeah,
Thank you,
All
thanks
right.
for coming in again.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Happy
Merry Christmas,
holidays.
you guys.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas, Happy
Merry
New Year.
Christmas, yep, same.
Okay, moving on. FY 21-25 financial forecast.
All right. So as promised, just make sure we are getting this up on the screen. Okay, so
Whoa,
by charter,
I got the same thing you have.
well, that's because we're
Is
not
that-
on the right page yet.
okay, that's the tool. That's the Excel sheet, so you want the PowerPoint or the PDF.
Next page.
Next one. Okay, thank you.
Then I have it up here. So by charter, the town administrator is required to forecast And this is also part of our policies. It's part of our policies and our planning procedure. So the idea here is this is a conservative look at what's coming and what the impacts of those things are financially for the town. So in summary, this is a tool. It's not an exact science, right? It's a model that uses logical assumptions to start helping us guide the budget process. Topic areas we'll go through are the methods to come to these conclusions, revenue, expenditures, capital, which has been separated out into its own capital plan, which I'll get next month. Debt, where we are there, reserves, recommendations, and a summary. So the methods, I looked at data with the staff from FY11 to FY20 to forecast revenues and expenditures based off trends, and you'll see some of that, and also included some guidance from the Selectman and the FinCom in order to create these numbers. Although the forecast is primarily relies on 3, 5-year, and 10-year averages, we did remove outliers so that it wasn't this doom and gloom picture or this rosy picture either. It's pretty realistic. And then these methods are intentionally conservative. We want to be conservative with our projections, but that doesn't mean we don't actually face some of the problems that are shown. So revenue, it's not a surprise to the board that primary driver of our revenue is the 2.5% tax increase allowed by Mass General Law. Projection is for 50,000 in new growth. This is a realistic number in my opinion. This last year we had 63,000 in new growth. In the year prior we had about 70. In the year before that there was about 40. So 50,000 is a reasonable projection. This year we're actually hoping to have more because of the solar, hoping that comes online this year, but that would be a 1-year big bump, and then the rest of the predictions should be around 50. And then, as you remember from my budget discussions last year, trying to get accurate and realistic with our local receipts so we're not in a position where we're over projecting our revenue. You want to be a little bit under intentionally. I know that sounds weird, but you want to create some free cash, and that's our primary way of doing it, without strangling the budget by being too conservative. And then state aid is state aid. So this is FY21's revenue projections. So it's about a 2.5% increase in taxes. The additional, a little bit more than 2.5, 2.7 is from the new growth that we realized last year. We're anticipating about a 2% increase in state aid, which is conservative, as you'll see. Local receipts, we're actually backing off a little bit to be more conservative. And then we don't have any free cash, so you'll see the issue that comes from that. If we don't use any free cash, the actual revenues are projected to grow about 1%. When our budget's projected to grow, you'll see somewhere between 3 and 5%. Okay, so revenue assumptions, the tax levy at 2.5%, local receipts backing off for 1 year to get us to a realistic target, and then growing 1% annually, and then state aid would be 2% based off trend analysis. This matches our town financial policies and recent efforts we've done to try and get a good hold of our budget. So this is long-term revenue forecasts. This year we'd be at 1%, a little over 1% as we get rid of, or try to get rid of as much free cash usage in the budget as we can, that one-time revenue, and then a little under 3% growth every year thereafter. Moving to the expenditure side, so education makes up 59% of our budget, and to be clear, Quabbin represents 52% of that, and Monty Tech represents another 7%, and that 52 does include debt. So when you hear the Quabbin assessment makes up 59%, it's not, it's 52, 59 overall with education. With level funding our budgets and using growth control measures, which we've been doing, there's not a lot of areas left for large scale cuts, which means we need to be careful with that allocation of additional funds. And then regionalization, we've reached what I would consider my recommendation of max capacity in terms of regionalization. There may be onesies and twosies that we can accomplish, but there isn't going to be much more opportunities to regionalize without harming our service levels, etc. There just isn't much left to regionalize. Most of our departments have some regional aspect now. This is how we came to the numbers. I know these are small, but they're in your packets and this will be available online. This is a 10-year look back. So this is our biggest expenditures and the ones that we have the least control over. So Monty Tech, Rutland Regional, Quabbin, our general insurance, and our retirement are all assessments that come to us more or less mandatory. So I did 3, 5, and 10-year averages for each, and then took an average of those averages in order to come up with what is reasonable estimates of future cost. And that can, as you see last year, our school cost spiked, and that can go down in some years, right? So this is just an average to try and get us to a number. So based off these trends, these are the assumptions in the model, that our personnel costs based off contractual obligations and other express wishes of the Finance Committee and the Select Board would be around 3.5% for our employees. That would be matched by employee support. We have very conservative numbers for Quabbin and Monty Tech at 6%. Health insurance would be at 6%. We know it's at 5% when we don't know what'll happen at the halfway through next year, but we hope it'll stay around 5-6%. Retirement at 7%. So last year we actually saw a reduction in our retirement assessment, but that's never a guarantee. And our averages say that it's around 7%. Insurance, that's general liability. That's going to continue to go up as well, about 6%. And then expenses, supplies, and snow and ice, which is just another version of supplies, just winter versions, all increasing by 2.5%. Would be pretty conservative.
Ryan, that's 6% for Quab and the QRSD, that's what we ended up agreeing on for this year, correct?
Yes. So it ended up being about 5.93% or just
What
around 6%.
we ended up having to do this year, okay, yeah.
So you'll see the yellow, that's numbers that we don't love, so we just repeated them, meaning that we don't have a solid handle on what those numbers were. So we added those in for averages purposes, but if you look back since FY11, the Quabbin increase has been 3.81, 1.98, 1, and then 5, 5, 1.835, 1.35, or almost 6. So that's why we get a 3-year average of 3.5, 5 years about 3.5, and 10-year 3.5, but it could easily be 5, 6. So we want to stay on the conservative end. And even if we back down to say 3% next year or 1%, if that's how the budget goes, it will spike again, so that needs to be built into the long-term projections. You can't add services to this level and then expect to cut them all.
Can I ask a question about the expenditure assumptions?
Sure.
So you singled out QRSD and Monty Tech there as separate line items. You know, with all the goings on about Quabbin Regional School District and the multiple town meetings we had about it, I think I understand that number pretty well. But how does the Monty Tech portion of that come into play? Is it a similar process with a different school board, or how does that work?
Based on students?
The assessment is based off student population, how many of your students go there, but it's
Okay.
17 towns.
And it is a different school board,
Right.
they have their own, yeah.
So there are many towns last year, and I don't want to speak too generally, but
Sure.
their assessments went really high. Ours didn't,
Right.
so it wasn't controversial. But if you look back,
I think a few years back it really went up.
so if you look back,
Now you're talking Monty Tech specifically now, yeah,
Yep.
right.
so if you look back to FY13, it was 11, FY14 was 16,
Okay.
15 was 11, 8, 15, 8, and then in the last 2 years it's been 1 and then a negative. So those assessments, it would be not very wise to say that they're going to continue to go down.
Right.
Students want to go to Monty Tech, it's a great school.
So we're experiencing the same fluctuations with Monty Tech as we kind of had to deal with this fall with Quabbin, right?
Yes,
It's just that
just not last year.
Just
Small
not
level,
recently.
I think.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And the budget size, you know, so Quabbin is, Monty Tech is 649,000 last
Sure.
year versus 4.7 million. So a 6% increase in either one is a lot for our budget, but obviously one is a larger bear.
Right. Okay, good.
About 50,000 for every 1% the Quabbin budget goes up. Is a good point of reference.
Okay, thank you.
So based off these projections, we're looking at a total budget next year of 9.783. Right now we're at a $9.3 million budget, so that's a big jump. And not sustainable and not something we can do. So it'll be part of the budget discussions, what we need to do to hit that number. If you look at the pie, the largest part of our expenses, this is important for all people in budgeting to understand, is 59% is education, 14% is our public safety, 9% and then 9% for everything else, public works, liability, and general government. So if you were to say cut salaries for general government or just DPW, the actual impact on the overall budget is, it's there and it needs to be considered, but it's not gonna change the future of the town. It doesn't mean that we don't look at every absolute penny. Bobby can tell you that I'm obsessed with every penny, finding a way to squeeze out more services. But there's only so much you can do with some of the smaller budgets. You know, if we take away the moderator's $100 stipend, it's not gonna change this budget situation. Not meaning to pick on him, I love Renee, he's a good guy. So here's the expenditure forecast projected out over 5 years. And you'll see the largest growth driver is in the education line, with nominal gains in all the other departments. And that's true in any town in Massachusetts, so it's not unique to our town, but still something every town has to figure out how they're gonna address. So then we'll talk about, and I'll show you the tool I use so you can actually look at the expense projections and how it's laid out in the model. So the budget deficit. So this is where we start talking about the difference between what we're bringing in for revenue and what we can, what we expect to pay in expenditure. So the deficit in this model from 21 to 25, that's a typo, I should say 25, increases from 320,000 is our deficit we're facing next year to 1.3 million. And that's if you compound growth over years, right? So if we control growth this year, that 1.3 would come way down. You're always gonna see a larger number at the end. But if we did nothing and we just paid everything, let's say we had this magic budget where we had all this money, you would see that type of growth over 5 years. Okay, so here's that visually. So the orange being your revenue, red being expenses. You see the expenses vastly outpacing the revenue and the deficit growing. So then debt. This is an important part of this calculation, and I'll show you why. So in order to strike, you need to strike a balance. You have to have the capacity to fund larger projects. Just because you don't, you still have to buy fire trucks and other things as they come along. Pay for school roofs, etc. These other big projects. You want the capacity to do that because you might not always get the chance to have an override. You still need those things. So having the right level of debt is important. And if you cut that out of the operating budget, you'll almost never get it back in. So you want to keep that capacity. Now, what capacity you want to keep, that is certainly up for debate and discussion. So current policy sets that at 2 to 5% of the operating budget. I'll show you what that looks like here. So if you were to keep our current level of debt, which is 3% of the operating budget, okay, a little under 300,000 to in 5 years 350,000 of the operating budget, that's the red line, that's the target. Our actual debt, what we're carrying on the books and what we anticipate is the orange line. So some interesting things. In FY23, we have a tremendous amount of capacity if we keep borrowing at the same level. What I mean by that is there'll be almost $200,000 to $250,000 worth of buying power to say do a large project like a building renovation or to buy a fire truck or any of these larger things. The school roof comes to mind. If you choose to cut that out of the operating budget, that might eat into the deficit, but then you wouldn't have that ability to borrow. So those are something that I'm working with the finance committee for sure. What do you want us to do with our debt and borrowing levels? It's going to have major implications 5-10 years down the road. But that is a good problem to see that drop off. What you want to do with that problem is what we have to figure out. And that's more of a policy and a long-term discussion than, say, a year-to-year annual budget discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't save it and use it for a capital expenditure, like a fire truck?
You could.
Say the
Sure.
notes get paid off, and then you say, we're gonna allocate this future money, get the same amount.
So the way that would look, and we'll use just easy dollars, is you have, say you have 300,000 for debt, and you only have 200,000 in bills. You could create a line item in your budget that says 100,000 for capital stabilization.
The next purchase.
That contingency line would fund right into your capital stabilization account, and you could fund the future that way. So you don't necessarily have to borrow, but you have to put in strong policies, because the next year when the school assessment spikes and you need a reserve of cash,
You don't wanna tap
the
into
desire
that.
to pull from that will be so strong that, you know, this board or future boards, they may not follow that policy. So the point of having strong financial policies that everybody agrees to, of course you can break them if you want to, but it's trying to set it up for long-term planning rather than, you're always tempted in the short term to fix the problem, which is why you have, in some areas, bad roads, crumbling infrastructure in terms of buildings, because you're always making that year-to-year decision. And the only way to get out of it is to either increase revenues or to plan and allocate as you can. We're trying to do both here. So reserves are really important because this borrowing we're talking about, you're gonna borrow at some point, regardless if it's debt excluded or not, relies heavily on the town's bond rating. We'll see that as if and when we borrow for the school roof. We wanna keep our bond rating strong, which it is, we're at the second highest level. In order to do that, they wanna see that you're saving money. And this is important, as we've seen, we have this operational deficit, the town officials and the residents don't wanna drop service levels too drastically in 1 year, so we're using free cash to supplement the budget. You don't wanna do that forever, but you could. And in a recession or a downturn, these would allow you to bridge, say, a 2 to 3 year gap in order to not crush the town.
Ryan, where did the percentages come from? The 5% stabilization, 5%, is that a recommended one, or?
So if you were to set up a town's finances,
Mm-hmm.
that's the best practice from the Department of Revenue. Any municipal financing class you go to, these
Nothing
are,
less than that, and so is that the bottom line?
that's where you should be at.
Okay,
So
alright.
if you're at 4.2, they don't give you an F. You know, if you're at 6.1, they don't give you an F. It's just, you don't want so much in reserves that you're not using it,
Sure, mm-hmm,
or you're overtaxing your residents. But you don't want so little that you don't have enough. So this is kind of that sweet spot. So for us, we have a stabilization, a capital stabilization, and we have a road stabilization account now that has $0 in it from last town meeting.
So we're, like, free cash says recommended is 5%, where are we now?
So at 620, we would be a little over 6.5%. And we do think that's because of the extra money that we got from the solar project.
Okay.
So we think we generated 5, and I'm
Mhm.
working on understanding, correcting a lot of stuff and understanding exactly how we're generating it. So we think we're at the right spot in terms of revenue projection, et cetera. But we don't wanna drop off a cliff and generate nothing because our free cash funds our capital.
mm-hmm,
And right now our operating budget. So that's, we hope to get 5% free cash at the end of the year. For a total reserve level of 11%. Okay, so our current stabilization is at 4.26%, which is a good number. It's not the best practice number, but it's good, it's strong, it's healthy. The municipal stabilization we borrowed from in recent to fund last year's capital project, and we also used it, 60,000 of it for the school roof feasibility study, which we will get reimbursed a little bit from. So that should be at 1%, and we're about 0.5% there. I'll show you that. In free cash, we generated more than we wanted to last year, so we need to make sure that we continue to generate enough, but not over-generate. And here are those numbers. In FY21, 4.26%, it's stabilization of a 5 recommendation. Capital stabilization is at 0.45% of a recommended 1. I'm sorry, it's 5.58. We did generate more, but we used 75 to fund the town center project at town meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So it was there, so that 5.58 is misleading, it's really 6.2. And then that puts us at a total reserve level of 10.28% of 11. Now, I just wanted to show you over the long term, if you did nothing, if you didn't put any away in savings, how the expenses would eat into that percentage over time. So if you did nothing, we would drop, 0.8 to 1% on our stabilization just doing nothing. There would be some interest gains, et cetera, but it's just a short little visual look at what happens over time. So here are the recommendations based off this, and then I'll show you the model. We need to continue to improve the budget process with the QRSD, so it's more upfront. I'd say the Finance Committee is already looking to go to the budget subcommittee meetings that are happening in January to be part of the budget earlier. One of the complaints from the school committee was, we'd already developed our budget and then you jumped in and said it was too much. We want you to be in at the beginning, so we're trying to honor that and work with them from the start. want to continue to develop a transparent budget process. You know, that's one of my things, just trying to get out there with numbers and make sure everybody's understanding how we're spending it. It's the only way to generate the type of trust that might get you additional revenues if you needed it. And it's also the right thing to do. We've got to continue to explore ways to reduce the deficit. I'll always be looking at that, economic development, regionalization, and then if necessary, a long-term solution to this would be an operational override. But that would have to be well-defined, and would have to make sure if that was an ask that it was done correctly, because those can be and should be tough asks. And then tying budget decisions to forecast plans and policies gives you more flexibility and stronger standing. In summary, nothing earth-shattering here for you. Expenditures are growing faster than revenues. There's not that many big cuts left without seriously changing service levels, which is still an option, but would change the way people experience the town currently. Defining policies is important for us, so we can make sure that we're putting the money to use the way you want it to be put to use. And as you've already put in your guidance, a limited growth budget's necessary to try and get through this current year, which is also a focus. So real quickly, I'll show you the tool I created to get this report. So in this first tab, you'll see the growth factors for each one of the different colors. So these growth factors I can play with them, right? So if we wanted to say dispatch, we will not allow more than a 0% increase in dispatch. So that would change the numbers throughout the model if you change the growth factors here. On the expense side, every line item in our budget, as you can see, is color coded, and all the future expenses are tied to the growth factor. So I can change FY25 by changing the growth factor in FY21. So this will form obviously the basis of the FY21 budget, and then we can reproject the forecast based off of what we do in FY21. Revenue is now broken down into every single component of revenue, so we can track the way that's coming in and make sure that we're not missing anything. And I'll give you an example of that. Well, I can't because that's in a different spreadsheet, so
That makes it nice.
here it is. So this is the look back. So we have 6 years of good actual data. So in order to project the revenue, we threw out the highest and lowest and then did an average of the 4 remaining years for each one of these categories, which is much more detailed than I was doing for you previously. And then we found something like this. So Board of Health permits in FY18 brought in 9,500 for the town, and then in FY19 we have brought in 0. Right, so that's a big gap with a 6-year average of $7,500. So we want to ask why. Why did that
I was
happen?
just gonna say, why?
That doesn't, yeah,
That
that's,
doesn't make any sense.
So we identified that we need a better policy from the Board of Health on how much they're going to turn over of their permits. So do the permits go into because there isn't one. Do the permits go fully into their revolving account? How much does the general fund get? And so I met with the Board of Health, showed them this in a very open manner, and said, what do we want to do with this revenue? Because if you're getting all the revenue, then we can't fund it on the operational budget side. And they were very open to that. It's a brand new board, really not their involvement at all. So they're looking at it, and we're going to come up with a policy that says X amount will go to the general fund versus this much into the revolving, so it matches best practice. So if we break it down this way, we can see these anomalies and try and make sure we're maximizing our revenue.
So like ambulance receipts, did that go down?
So the 5-year average is 145,000, or the 6-year average. If you throw out this big year, this 219, and the lowest year, they're pretty even across the board. So 158, 155.
219 and
So we have that projected at 153, which is a little bit higher than where we're at, because we believe that there'll be more revenue generated from the increased hours.
did you see when it hit 219?
Yes,
That's quite a jump, huh?
it is.
And then,
That's also the year, not coincidentally, that the enterprise fund was put into the general fund. So there's some math to do there on how that was combined, or if there was any additional revenue in the enterprise fund that was inflating that number.
and then as the state money, the state-owned land, 55,000.
Which number are you looking at?
You just, you just moved it. Go
Maybe
back.
not here once.
Yeah, I go a little blind looking at this stuff.
Keep
Do we
bringing
have
it up
that
a
in
little
our
bit.
packet?
Yes.
Up a little. The other way, I mean,
I don't
down.
have it, so at least I can't find it, so.
Right.
Oh, that's state aid,
Oh.
so that's a different
No,
category.
state-owned land.
Yeah, this is.
55, 56, 56.
So those four
And then it
categories,
dropped.
those four categories are the state aid numbers that come in.
But the state-owned land, I wonder why that dropped, because the amount of land that they own shouldn't change.
So these numbers, when we get that sheet that we say the state aid numbers are in, this comes from votes
Oh.
at the legislature. So sometimes, not saying this always happens, but let's say they increase chapter 70 for the schools, they'll drop charter school tuitions. So if you don't track it at an individual level, you wouldn't see that your net gain was zero, even though the state says
And we have no control over that either.
zero.
Right.
Well, I do make sure we go visit our legislative
Yeah.
officials and
Mhm.
show them these numbers so that they can advocate for us, but no, we don't have any formal control. So that's the revenue look back. This is the debt service. Okay, so you can see the numbers. The road project is 170,000 of that debt number that falls off the books in 23.
So that's why we saw.
That's
the
why you
drop.
see the sharp. You'll also see the 2015 dump truck coming off in next year's budget, so that'll create a little bit of room. And then we'll get into a permanent borrow for the 18 dump truck and 17 fire engine, which we've already paid some of, but we'll get into a more permanent borrow. Right now, you recently signed a renewal of that bond, a ban. So these are the numbers over time. So FY24, that's where all that capacity is. So in the actual model, I built in capacity into the, I said added 100,000 to debt to make sure that the numbers stayed consistent over time, in case you wanted to make that decision. But they could be pulled out to bring down that $1.3 million number. So that is high level of the forecast. Went over this with the finance committee, and they immediately got to work looking at this year's budget numbers, because that 320,000, it's not going to go away, so we got to fix it somehow. And in the past, we've added, say, 100,000 of free cash. That drops that number to 220. The assessments come in lower, you come down, state aid comes up. That's how we get to from this calamity number to the number. But that's not going to happen forever. So at some point, a decision's going to need to be made. But planning gives you hope, so we'll figure it out. That is all, Mr. Chairman. Unless there's questions.
Okay. Any comments, questions?
None here.
Looks like we'll have to sharpen our pencils.
All right, thanks, Brian. We'll go to the tax title presentation.
Okay, so this is something we've been offering annually since I've been here, and also was a request of the board. Talk about tax title. So tax title is those properties that we've put into what we call tax title or liens, because they haven't paid their taxes. So addressing that backlog and also making sure that we're keeping our collection rates up is an important part of our revenue process, which you just saw. If we don't hit our numbers, then we don't have the money to do the things we need to do. So the purpose of this plan is to tell you what our process is and what our plans are. So the vast majority of Hubbardston residents, 98.5%, pay their taxes. That's a big number. There's a small percentage who owe taxes backdating more than a decade, and the total amount in that backlog is $423,000. This is after the FY18 takings. We still have to do this year's takings, and then collect this year's backlog, which should wash, so it'll be about that level.
Are these all properties that are occupied, or are some of these properties where we're still trying
It's everybody,
to
everybody.
find who owns it?
And as you'll see in my presentation, the problem is the last bit of money is the hardest and most expensive to get.
Mm-hmm.
So the low-hanging fruit, we're good at getting. It's the stuff that's gonna take more, and it's whether or not we wanna devote the resources that are required to, say, go after someone who may or may not exist, who no longer lives at that property.
Assuming something like that occurred, what
It does
does that,
occur.
what does that do to the property in terms of the town? Can the town, I guess, take the property and then sell it?
Yes,
They could do that,
but
okay.
foreclosure costs are prohibitive.
Oh, they are, oh, okay.
So Sandy, you'll see it in this presentation, but it's a good question. So Sandy gets $5,000 a year to do tax title work, which is enough to write some letters, maybe do a foreclosure or two, if we're lucky.
Mm-hmm.
To do more than that would mean more resources, whether free cash or operating budget needs to go towards that. So we have to decide at what level you want that done.
And I think Susan had suggested selling the debt. Is
Yeah, I
that
was just gonna ask that.
So we're looking into that. I'm not ready to
Yes,
make-
you did, she did, yeah. I
to
remember
make a
that.
recommendation to the board. The feedback I've gotten from my residents, wow. The feedback I have gotten from my peers is that if it's not well prepared when they get it, then you kinda get a bad product. So you're paying a lot for them to clean up. So right now, we're trying to get to the point where it's very clean, and then they can come in and do the final part, because that's the expensive part, is to sell. So we are looking at it, and I will come to you with a formal recommendation.
So this number 98.5%, how does that compare to comparable towns?
We are, if not with our peers, above our peers.
Excellent.
So this is just the tax collection process. You're all familiar with this as taxpayers. It's an important part of this presentation for people to view, but I'm not gonna get into the details of how to pay your taxes. Pay them when they're due and on time. But if you do wanna make your payments, we're open Monday through Thursday. We accept payments of all types, which people are surprised sometimes, check, cash, credit card. And we're looking into our lockbox. We may not have this in the future. It's only because they're changing and we're not sure if it's worth continuing. That does mean more mail for our tax collection office, so we're weighing that out. We'll have a recommendation on that soon, but right now you can mail it to the lockbox. You can pay through the town's website, there's a small fee for that. This is charged by the credit card companies, not us, it doesn't come to us. And then you can drop them off in the mailbox 24 hours a day outside the town clerk's office. So here's the 5-year tax collection. So committed is how much we've taxed people, and collected is how much has come back, and then the percentage of that's collected. So this is just real estate taxes. This isn't personal property. It's not CPA monies. So those are a more significant scrub, and we're working on that as we're trying to get more and more data about this. So it represents some of that extra money that we can gather, but this is real estate taxes. This is what's reported to you in the revenue and the bulk of it, the vast majority of it.
is a CPA total in this presentation?
It is not. So tax title payments, so this is monies that we've received for people who owe money back tax-wise. So this is when we make payment deals with people, when people come in and say, I wanna pay my taxes, as part of the plan you'll see in the future. So you'll see Sandy really focused on this in 18 and 19. We got a lot of big payments back in 19, which is good. It's not necessarily sustainable. And the more you attack this, the more likely are that number's actually gonna go down, because you don't have as many. However, we haven't collected as much as we want so far in FY20, so it will be a focus in the next couple months.
And what was the total figure that we, that's outstanding, 300 something?
423,000.
420.
But that's, we haven't committed 19 yet, so
Yeah,
you'll,
sure, yeah.
that'll be added on. Committed is the wrong word, that's a tax word, it should be, put it into takings.
Mhm.
Okay, so what is tax title? This is when we put a lien on folks' properties for when they don't pay their taxes. This is a very formal process, it costs money for us to do it, to make sure it's done correctly, because we don't wanna be challenged or create problems for people down the road. A lot of tax title work is cleaning up old tax title work, so I can't emphasize enough that Sandy spends a lot of her time fixing old problems with bad takings and retaking things, etc. So this is the basic process. You advertise the taxes, you tell people that you're gonna take, you establish the lien, you try to collect, and then if it gets to that point, you start a foreclosure process. And this is town-wide, we all work on this, so permit applications and other changes to lands come through the tax collector's office to make sure that anyone doing work doesn't owe us taxes. This can cause problems that can come to the board. People who for many reasons, people don't pay their taxes. Sometimes it's not that nefarious, or trying to do the thing that might help them pay the taxes, and they can't do it because we have something on it, right? But we apply the law evenly, and it can cause some issues, so that's something you might see. We have a very strict policy on paying your taxes or not, to try and be fair. Here are our current back tax collection efforts. So we put FY17 taxes into tax title in March, then subsequents are put in March as well. FY18, we just completed that in November, and the subsequents will be processed in January. And then in FY19, we'll start attacking those subsequent tax titles. So it'll be this plan. We'll send demand letters to residents. Sometimes people just don't know. Sometimes they do know. Sometimes the letter prompts them to come in and pay. And then they'll get a letter from me. That was successful last year. I'm bringing a few people in, and we're going to do that again, just saying this is a serious problem. Most people pay their taxes. We'd like you to come in and talk to us about being like your peers and paying your taxes. We're going to try and start foreclosure on one property. Again, this is primarily cost driven. It's just thousands of dollars, and we don't have thousands of dollars. And then we did start one in FY19. We're going to strive for 2 in FY20. We're going to work on land of low value properties, which is I don't want to call it tedious. It's just a time-consuming process with, it's something that we need to do, but it doesn't have a big bang for your buck, right? So it tends to get pushed, but we are trying to focus on it. This would get us takings of actual lands that aren't worth much money, and then we can resell them in an auction. So we're working on that. And then, just so you know, there are some situations where people are literally willing to give us the deed to the property and the house, and there's still a process that you have to go through. There's still a foreclosure process. So someone could be looking to hand it to us, and we know the cost is so much that we're not willing to take it at this point. Right? So there are, I said we do the low-hanging fruit. There's a reason why some of these hang forever. It doesn't mean that we're not trying to get them. I'm just trying to be thorough and explain it.
And then also it may spur a building too, you know, if someone sells a lot and then they could build a house. And
So we have been working with the planning, I say we, me and Sandy, been working with the planning board who has money for affordable housing. We think this might be a route for that, so we've been exploring it with legal counsel. Can we foreclose on some of these and then put them into affordable housing status, which would get rid of a tax problem and then add to our rules? We're looking at that, trying to be creative. But there's rules to it, and it's always complicated, so. And that's a medium range plan, not a short range plan. It just takes years to foreclose things. And this is how much, as I was just telling you, Jeff, that we're putting into tax title in these years. So in FY16 we added 54,000, in 17 it was 51, and in 18 it was 45. So we're adding less, which means Sandy's doing a good job doing that upfront work so that people don't get into tax title. We don't want to get it that far because that's when it gets expensive. So based off, and these are the conclusions, this aggressive upfront collection, the amount of unpaid taxes has been decreasing, which is what we want to see. We want to make the process current and hand off a good year-to-year focus. We're training the staff to make sure that they understand how they can help in the tax collection effort, and we're committed to executing this plan, Sandy and I, during this year. That is the presentation.
Okay. Any further comments from anyone or questions for Ryan?
No, keep it up. Be nice to get some of these back on the tax roll.
Yeah, Sandy's, she's doing a good job. She's working on it. And then, of course, you switch softwares on her,
Yes.
and there's a whole nother layer of having to fix things. So she would be saying that, you know, she wishes she was a little farther, but she's been dealing with that. That's better for the town long term, but not short term. So we're working on all aspects of it.
Great.
Okay, then we'll move to additional March service discussion.
Alright, so I wanted to bring this to the board. So how our Mart service works. So Mart service could be called our senior van, our COA van, our local transportation service. So we signed a contract with Mart, the Regional Transportation Association, and for the van that we get, we pay a nominal fee, about 1/5 of the cost of providing this service. So the way that works is, let's say last year when we had 35,000 in service costs. That's for the drivers, for the gas, for everything involved in the service. Based off this state money and different grants that they get, our actual cost in our assessment was about $6,500. So that comes out of our state aid. You never really see it. It's called the cherry sheet offsets. We provide that service. We have one van in Hubbardston, and the problem here is regionally, the people who need the van, because they don't really have any other way of getting around. And just local examples, they need to go to Gardner for a hospital appointment, or to do groceries in a local town, or to shop, or in some cases, even go to the town diner or the senior center just to get out of their house and do services. They don't have vehicles, they can't walk, etc. So a lot of people use the service in this way, and others use it for just regular regional transit, and then there's a lot of medical. So if we send our one van to Worcester, let's say, for a follow-up appointment, medical appointment, that ties up the van for most of the day. So I'm bringing this to you because you're going to hear, recently there's been an uptick in the amount of services we're providing, which is good, but that means we're also denying people services, because as we go to Worcester, we can't service the local area, and vice versa. So we'll set up a shopping day, say Tuesdays and Thursdays by schedule. Medicals take precedent, so if you have to go to your medical appointment, we have to move everybody from Tuesday to Wednesday. And we deal with this, it never comes to you. This is part of managing this service in a small rural town with one bus. So we were asking for another bus from Gardner in order to supplement, so we could do more stuff. We wanted to do more stuff. We take on 100% of that cost, right? So it wasn't a massive hit, but our assessment was going up to the point where now I think I needed to talk to you about it, because we're changing service levels. So we asked Mart and did a lot of work with them to see if we could get a second van that was also reimbursed at the same rate that the first van was, and they said no. So you need to know that, and you also need to know that in order to provide a second van's level of service, it would be another $31,000 on our budget. So we're weighing as a staff right now, do we deny people, and it does upset people, and we get calls from people's kids, grandkids, etc., saying, you know, my loved one relies on this van, and we're very sensitive to that. On the other hand, we have a service level that would need to drastically impact our budget, 30,000, as we keep showing you, we don't have 30,000. So Mart asked me to bring this in front of you, but also I need to ask, do you want to add another van level of service, or do you want us to come up with another proposal, or leave it as it is? Another proposal might be we only take people this far with the van, or we take people this far, or we only take people in Hubbardston. Each one of those is gonna bother someone.
Now, has the service changed recently in order to tie that van up, or has it always been like this? You know, like between appointments and everything else?
The demand has increased, he was saying.
Yeah, I mean, is
Almost
it because
50%.
they're offering more, or
They're offering the same, but more people are
are
using it.
taking advantage of it? Not taking advantage of it, but using it.
Utilizing it.
Yeah.
And we wanna use it, I mean, we're happy that
Oh,
we're
yeah.
flying around everywhere, cause it's a good service, and it's needed, for sure. But we need a way to, you know, if a resident says, why aren't you doing this, we have to answer that question, and like, I have been, you know, this is what we can provide, and I just need to know from the board if you wanna provide more or something different.
How do you suggest we pay for it?
I don't think you can.
Yes.
I made the point to him earlier today on this very item, similar to that question, just because of the discussion we had at the last meeting for the employees who aren't even getting paid. And it was roughly around the same amount of money that Bob had to get it, and for the same reason, we said we don't have it,
Exactly.
so.
Yeah, I don't think we have, right now, I mean, especially going over the budget.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really saying we should add another van, I think that's pretty obvious that we can't,
Mhm.
but do we want to bring Mart in to have them, you know, to lobby for more services? I'll tell you the answer's gonna be no, and they have some clout,
Mhm.
but it's worth them hearing. Or do we wanna limit the service area, right? So right now, we don't really limit it, if you need to go somewhere, we take you.
In other words,
Yeah.
not literally, but in other words, as an example, cancel the Worcester runs. But that's, could be medical for someone.
Right.
So how do you do that, you know?
The only reason we go to Worcester is cause someone really needs to go to Worcester.
Mhm.
So if you do limit the area, it's gonna solve some of the problem, but it's gonna hurt some of the people
Sure.
that say doing their cancer treatments, which is.
No matter what
they-
you
Yeah.
do, you're gonna hurt somebody, no matter if it's getting groceries or their medical,
Mhm.
you know, somebody's gonna be affected by it.
And then you don't want, I know you said you had, Tuesdays and Wednesdays was groceries,
Tuesdays, Thursdays.
Tuesdays and Thursdays. And you would hope someone wouldn't make an appointment on that day, you know,
We
do they
don't
know
make
that
them.
they can't make an, a doctor's appointment on those days, or?
So as long as it's not, like, you would have to be dealing with it every day, but there's some times where you're just like,
You
okay,
have
that person needs to go get
You
their
have to.
cancer treatment or their
Okay.
whatever, and they can't get there any other way, so that trumps shopping day. But we don't let people schedule it if we can help it.
Okay.
But I'm telling you, there's just too many onesies and twosies to, and Sharon does an awesome job, but she's just, it's good, I mean, the people are using the service, but I don't want you to be surprised by someone coming to you and saying, hey, the Mart van didn't help my grandfather or grandmother today. You're gonna get those calls where, that's the point where we're at here, which is why I'm bringing it to you.
But we really have no option at this point.
So, not
I
gonna,
mean-
not gonna make the call tonight, but let me know what you want me to bring to you so that you can kinda discuss and the answer could be do nothing, you know, just keep doing what you're doing. I'm fine giving that answer as long as I have the consensus.
Has there been any discussion or reaching out to the people who are most directly involved in running the service, i.e. the driver, et cetera, and so forth, to see what they might suggest for creative ways we might be able to
I don't wanna,
improve our service?
I don't want this to sound the way it's gonna sound, but our drivers wanna drive, so we should do more driving.
Mm-hmm,
I don't blame them, that's their income,
sure.
they want more work, so.
Mhm.
I can bring them in, but I can tell you what they're gonna say. We should bring they're really good with the residents, they wanna work, so. It's up to me to rein them in.
I would say we'd have to leave it the way it is for now, unless
Right,
we
yeah,
come up
right.
with some
We don't have the money, right?
other way to do it.
People agree?
Yep.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't, get, blood from a stone. The money's not there, we can't do the service. We can continue to provide what we have been providing, but any increase is out of the question right now, considering the budget situation, so let's keep doing what we're doing.
So the MART officials did say, you should limit your transportation area, right? They always come up with
So other towns probably limit?
some do. And my argument to them, and
I hate to I mean, if somebody has to go to Worcester for a cancer treatment, how are you gonna say we're not gonna go there, you know?
yeah, it's really hard.
No, I mean, something like that's pretty important. I guess we'll have to.
So if you want me to
And
look into
more
that, I can bring
exposed
you more
in a
data.
smaller town too, it's more exposed as far as who's getting.
Oh, yeah.
More data on what, limiting the service area?
Yeah.
But if you're not interested in that, I don't wanna spend the time doing that. If you're fine with the service, that's great. If you wanna limit the area or investigate that, we can do that.
Well, I think maybe limit the service area for certain things. I mean, obviously, I'm sure they don't go grocery shopping in Worcester, or, I'm sure it's a local place.
Gardner or Westminster probably.
But medical, that's probably the furthest distance they'll go for different appointments, right?
Yeah, and I think
general.
as far as we've gone is say Marshfield, it's
Mhm.
for very specific.
Really?
No one would say that person shouldn't go for that, they just might say we can't. We're now hurting the other residents too, so
Yeah,
we
yeah.
can't do that.
It's more like a health insurance
Yeah,
canceled.
we're not just like, yeah, sure, we'll take you
Letting
down
you-
there, it's
and then
always.
all of a sudden they say, no, we're not gonna do it anymore, meanwhile, person died.
We also can't tell the person we bumped why we've taken that other person, so you'll
Sure.
hear,
Mm-hmm.
the van's going everywhere, you know, it's not.
So basically, all we can say is we're sorry, but we can't afford it right now, we can't do, really. Other than back to limiting the areas, but again, we're back to that, we're gonna,
Yeah, I would leave
Hurt
it the way it
somebody.
is and see if it gets worse, and then maybe address it again.
okay. You in agreement on that, everybody?
What do you do during the day?
Yeah.
Jeff? We'll buy a van, you can drive it.
I'm not,
There you
part-time
go.
for a limousine company on weekends.
It's gonna be on call though, you're gonna, it's free.
My hours are narrow, cause I take Gordon to school and have to pick him up too, but other than that, I love driving, so.
No, you can still go through Barry.
And I have a
Pick 'em
license,
up.
my dot license allows me to drive up to 14 passengers, so.
You're hired.
I'll start looking for a bus.
Yeah.
I'll donate
Let me
a
know,
bus.
let me know when you get it.
Hmm.
Okay, business license renewals, that's what we were all signing, I believe. And are there any reservations on any of your parts on any of the ones that we signed? Anybody have any questions on the,
No, I have no reservations or
on
questions.
the businesses?
Bobby's gonna just explain the one that was
That was
taken
taken out.
off and the one outlier.
Yeah,
Okay.
there are, it's all the same as last year, the only, change is the hub of the hub is no longer a business, so she's not applying for her license this year.
Okay.
That's the only difference from last year, everything else is all set.
And the pending one is,
The pending one is the, I always pronounce his name wrong, Natishan home, the lodging one, just because of the building inspector wasn't able to get there because of the
Okay.
snowstorm.
Yeah.
So he's going tomorrow, so pending that inspection, everything should be fine. That
Is
was
this
the only
one that came up a few years
National.
back in terms
Doesn't
of,
ring a bell.
why isn't my thinking,
Uh,
someone was claiming that it was a certain kind of a home.
I
Uh,
don't recall.
I remember Mike and, or maybe you weren't on the board then, but,
It says
Okay.
lodging house.
but there was questionable on that, but, okay, all right.
So this is pending, we'll hold this anyway until the inspection comes through and everything's fine.
Alright, so I'll make a motion to sign the business license renewals and also the other one pending the, outcome of the building inspector.
Motion made
Second it.
and seconded. Any discussion?
No?
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Old business, historical and natural resources, master plan.
this is just more of an FYI, so the final draft of the Historic and Cultural Resources Master Plan was passed. We're gonna put it up on the website, this is another chapter done. Good work by the planning board, the historical commission weighed in, did some work on this, and then MRPC, this was all grant funded. So it's just another chapter in the master plan. We've got 2 more already grant funded and in the works, and we're gonna be applying for another 2, try and get a fully completed master plan within the next 18 months. This is some good reading, people would be interested, I think, to read some of the history and then the recommendations on how we should preserve some of our historic and cultural resources that have already been started by the historical commission, and it just kind of gives you that springboard as a master plan should do.
Okay. Nothing we have to do on this one?
Nope, this is just wanted to let
Okay.
you know it's done.
Any questions on that? Anybody? Okay. TA report. Okay, you're up.
So first, the turkey was so successful in my last report that I added a wreath this time. Just want that acknowledged.
Yes.
All right.
Excuse me, Ryan, I'm meaning to interrupt, but what's this? I just clicked on something that came up, asbestos report, is that part of it?
That'll be part of this.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you.
And that's not as bad as it sounds, we'll get to that.
Okay.
So the the FY 21 budget update, the CIPC is done with their capital plan. I'm gonna present that with members of the CIPC on your January 6th meeting. So this is the capital plan, we'll go over it in detail, incorporate the board's comments. This is a recommendation from your committee that's done this work on your behalf. Department requests, I'll have those by next week. And I worked with the finance committee to review these estimates that you saw in the forecast and to start working on the 21 budget. Fortunately, it's already that time. Department report, I've worked with the Board of Health and the Planning Board, trying to support some of their initiatives. I met with the Board of Health and working on their permitting and budgeting process, trying to make it easier to understand for applicants, to make it part of the economic development process, and to make it as streamlined as possible with other permitting, which I think Mallory can help with, working in all the different departments. Also encourage both boards to work with their Board of Selectmen liaisons and continue to coordinate effort. I think we're seeing a lot of fruit from our joint efforts in various things, and would like to make sure that those committees are part of our long-term efforts and revenue generating opportunities. In terms of financial management, I met with various departments, boards, and committees. I'm working on some of these accounts in our chart of accounts that are leftovers from another time, to make sure that we're spending the money we said we were gonna spend, cleaning up the money that we don't need, and making sure that everything is identified so that it's handed off from leadership to leadership. So I'm gonna continue to report on that, but we're making some progress there, and you should see, a 10% reduction in our accounts by the end of this year. Capital projects, continuing to work on the town's capital plan, finalizing procurement for the library basement roof and the senior center kitchen renovation. The small bridge projects on Williamsville Road and Ragged Hill Road are now complete. You can see the improved guardrails. The bridges are strengthened on the edges and a little bit wider than they were. If you're looking for a tremendous amount of width, that's not what this means. It just means the edges were cleaned up and added on to. But it was widened and should feel a little bit more safe. And so the asbestos you were talking about, wanted to give a report on this center school roof. So the timeline, I meet every Friday with the roof folks, our OPM and our architect, and Jeff is a part of many of these meetings as well. So they are done with their drawings and their schematic design. It's not public yet, but they're finishing that up. The final comments will be in. We should have a number next week that I can report to the board on what the school roof project is going to cost. And then they'll be submitting it at the end of January, final submission to the MSBA February 13th, and then we'll head into approval process for town meeting as part of seeing if we're going to seek the money for this important project. So that's the timeline. The asbestos report, which is in your folders, they found little to no evidence of asbestos. The levels they did, obviously they're going to remove everything safely, but it's in I'm not even going to pretend I know what it is, but it's in the report. The way that they are going to abate it doesn't require an extensive amount of third-party resources or hazardous material resources, and the point of that being it's not going to be very expensive to remove. So they did sampling everywhere. There's just not a lot of problems in terms of asbestos and hazardous materials, so you'll see as part of the recommendations those costs aren't there. I know the board had asked me to report on that specifically. Economic development. So you'll be happy to know I submitted a grant application in conjunction with the planning board to study the town pit and adjacent lands. We received permission from the Marinellis to also include their land as part of this assessment. So this grant would be $50,000 or so to look at the feasibility of an industrial or commercial park in that area, and also offer other recommendations. So we think we put in a strong application. We worked with a consultant in order to make sure it was a strong application. If this comes to fruition, you would get a report on, what can we do there, what should we do there, just a regular feasibility study. So we should hear back in January on that as part of my commitment to the board on investigating that town pit land, trying to figure out what we can do there. And it doesn't mean that any options would be decided. Obviously, that report could find that we should do something completely different, and then we'll investigate that. Just want to get some no's out there so we can start focusing that town pit land. And then we received final documents from the Vincent family for the pending land swap. Okay, that document, we were waiting for the Vincent family. They've sent that to our council. Our council's finalizing that. My goal in life is to get that to you and get that off the books. I know you ask about that occasionally. And Travis and I met with Habitat for Humanity to walk the Ragged Hill lots. They finalized their choice. It was the choice that the board recommended next to this land swapped land. We will be bringing RFPs for selling the Ragged Hill lots and doing the affordable option RFP to your meetings in January. We'll get that going in time for building season, hopefully. And lastly, for employee recognition, wanted to recognize our senior workers this month. A few of them were at our volunteer night, which was very successful next door. Specifically Patricia Woodward, Karen Wolf, Rebecca Goss, and Patricia Lamoureux for their work in the town offices, and Richard Hackett for his volunteerism. So these senior workers come, they work hard all day for us, doing the things that we need to do. They go above and beyond. They're very invested in the work they're doing. They ask a lot of questions, which is good. And I know Richard specifically can keep the senior center open and help run it with his volunteerism. And I found out that one of those is my boss's boss. She let me know that Rebecca is Jamie's mother, so I'm very careful not to upset her when she's around. She's awesome. She helps me out all the time. I would say that anyway. And then upcoming stuff, your 5-year capital plan will be presented, and the benchmarking discussion will happen in January.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, policies to review, meeting room policy.
Okay, your current meeting room policy looks like this. It's from 2008. Bless you.
Thank you.
So we do have issues time to time scheduling who's going to be in what building space. So I think it's good to formalize this. So this is the old policy, as was in your packet. So basically, if you are a board that uses it consistently, you get it first. Senior centers will address that in my recommendation to you, and then library basement, same type of focus. It also, if you look here at the bottom, talks about the police training room. So I just want to show you my recommendation and why. So this is the policy I'm recommending to you that would request that anyone using the senior center senior center first check in with the Council on Aging to make sure, or their designee, so that meeting space is open, because it is primarily Council on Aging first. They've never denied a request that wasn't a conflict, so I just think it should be pointed out that they control the room.
So this is gonna be added?
Yes. And I don't know why it's not. So the language I would add there would be, this is the wrong version, so the use of the senior center is on a first come, first served basis, to be approved by the senior center director or his or her designee. And the sign up scheduling or request is on the calendar of the Council on Aging desk.
I'll make a motion on
Yeah,
that.
I'll make the
Just
motion.
I'm sorry, one more
one more.
recommendation.
Okay.
There's language in there that allows folks to use the police department training room for meetings. I would say to nix that. I don't think that's an appropriate space to have public meetings, just because.
Should we do two different motions then?
You can probably do it.
Or did you want that?
Can I
as
ask
part
a
of the
question?
first?
Yes.
Is there a challenge finding meeting space for the various committees that need to meet?
Not unless you wanted to put everybody on camera, then there would be. Which
Okay.
some people want to do.
Does every committee or board have the option to being on camera?
Yes.
Okay. How many take advantage of that option?
This board, the planning board, the cable committee,
Okay.
and sometimes conservation when they have a public hearing.
And I'm assuming that all has to be done here on account of the cameras?
Yes.
Okay.
There is actually a mobile camera, so you can do it in there,
Oh,
or in the library basement, but the quality is not as good. This
And
would
the
be
mobile one, that can't be live?
that is not live. It's just recorded.
That's the one they use in town meeting, right? Yeah.
Alright, I'll make the motion to approve the meeting room policy with Ryan's recommended changes.
Motion made
Second it.
and second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Okay. Signboard usage.
So this is another one where I'm just showing it to you, along with the
These are the two signs that have just been put up, correct? that
No.
we're talking about?
No, this is,
No, it's the
this
one
is
under the fire station.
what some people affectionately call
Oh,
the
that
blinky
sign,
sign.
okay, that's, all right. Okay.
So I'm just gonna show it to you and then,
Is it the one at the rec field?
yes.
Yeah.
So this is detailing what can go on those signs, who the priorities are, who needs to approve it, which right now it says the chairman of the board of selectmen, which I think might be a little restrictive. And then what needs to be applied. So I think much like the last one we talked about, what can go on public information sites, especially up at Wainwright, that corner, Clark's Corner, is it Clark's Corner?
Charlie Clark
Charlie
Corner?
Clark Corner.
Charlie Clark, yeah.
That's one policy that needs to be addressed, and then the blinky sign, as people call it, and the cheese board. So I think all of these should be considered in one, so I wanted to show you this policy again, and maybe have a longer discussion about all of them. Who should be in charge of what can be displayed, and why.
Is the police in charge of the one at the rec field?
Yes.
Is the chief, right?
So it says, upon approval of the select board or the town administrator, some departments may have standing approval. But that's morphed into the police having approval over messages,
Mm-hmm.
so that should be revisited. Not because there's a problem, but just to make sure that that's what the board intends.
Should we now be adding in these two signs for the town, because the idea was to have something available for,
Well, it's
Wasn't
just
it businesses?
advertising signs.
Yeah.
It's
well,
not
shouldn't there be some kind of policy for that,
That would fall under the sign bylaw.
under the sign bylaw, okay, all right.
that's not really messages, that's more of like an advertising sign.
Yeah.
So these are messages that can change, so you wanna
Mhm.
control them.
Okay.
Control's a strong word, you wanna make sure that they're meeting the intent of the board.
Okay. So does this need to be approved by us, or is this just for our,
I would like the board to consider these so we can have consistent policy for all signage and its usage.
You said the cheese board? What is the cheese board?
So that is the sign that we put out advertising town meeting or elections or votes.
At the entrance, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, we get a lot more requests for these than you think. I mean, so everyone wants to, there's only so much signage in town. These are big opportunities for people to advertise things. We just wanna be clear on what can and cannot go up. Because it becomes a problem sometimes, very occasionally.
So is everything pretty much spelled out in the current one?
well, that was my next question to Ryan. You didn't ask to add or change anything in what you just said, correct? So-
Nope.
So, yeah,
Yeah, so I'll make the motion to approve the signboard usage policy.
motion made
Second it?
and second, discussion, all in favor?
Yes.
Yep.
Aye.
Yes.
And
Okay.
would you like to maintain the standing approval for the police chief?
Yes.
Yes.
Amend it to that.
We have some minutes to approve, okay, the meeting December 9th, that's a week ago, we were all here, so, motion to approve that.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting of December 9th.
I'll second the motion.
2019.
Motion made and second, any discussion, all in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes. And then the same meeting, executive session
So
minutes.
These minutes will be sent to you.
Mhm.
We have to meet in executive session to release them. So we
Wait.
won't be voting on them tonight, but they'll be sent to you to review.
Oh, so we're not gonna,
We'll skip
so
it.
we'll pass by those, okay,
These are Bobby's first executive session minutes.
okay?
So take a look at them, see if the format is what you want,
Sure.
how much detail from the executive session the board is looking to
Some-
require.
This will probably be on the agenda for the meeting in January
Yes.
to approve them, fine, okay. Appointment resignations, Leroy Lehane, Mart Driver.
Leroy drove for us for a long time. He got another job working for Mart in Gardner, a full-time position, a good opportunity for him, so he's moved on, resigned, mutually acceptable resignation. We were able to thank him for his service. We gave him a Hubbardston patch and a pin, and we're not sure if we're replacing his position yet, but we'll let you know.
I'll make a motion to approve the resignation of Leroy Lehane, smart driver.
Motion made
Seconded.
and second, discussion, all in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Okay. Committee updates, we'll pass by that, unless Dan gave anything for you to
He did.
present, okay? Matters not reasonably, just so we don't have anything. Public? No. We don't have executive session tonight, right? Okay, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Second it.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor?
Dean?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.